let's just talk about where to find a caller. So when I was running that business, believe it or not, I would just post jobs on Craigslist. So I would post a not so sophisticated job posting, work from home. I'd have the compensation, some details of the position, cold calling, whatever. For each job posting I put on Craigslist, I'd probably get like 100 responses from all over. I started using a job board at workathomemoms.com. It's a website, workathomemoms.com. Actually, it's WHAM. It's not, so it's WHM.com. But if you go to this URL, there's a forum, and you can actually post jobs for free in their forum. So there's actually a room in their forum for job postings and a category for telecommuting, work at home telecommuting jobs. And I got some really great people from that job board as well. I mean, that actually, when I found that, I really kind of started shifting to. I thought that I just found work at home moms to be a great group of people because they don't have the aspiration and the need to work full time, because there a lot of them are work at home moms. They've just had a child or whatever. They just want to be active and make a little bit of money, and and not just watch TV all day. Although a lot of people that ended up coming through that website weren't either even moms, and weren't even, some of them were males. If that shows you it was a mix, but it's one resource for you. And then you can also look at Odesk, or actually this is an old slide. It's Odesk has been rebranded as Upwork. So that's one site there. It's a job posting. It's not a job posting. It's a site to post, to find people. It's kind of like the Match.com of finding skilled people in different areas. So you can find cold callers on there. You can find web developers, web designers, graphic designers, copywriters, all different things on Upwork.com. But you can certainly find people on there. And the nice thing about that site is you can find people from all over the world, and you can pay them through that site. So you give Upwork your credit card credentials, and then you just get billed weekly for the time that they work, and you can see when they're working and whatnot. One thing that often comes up is that since you're hiring virtual people, they can be anywhere, and you could hire offshore or domestic, meaning I'm based in the U.S., so domestic for me is U.S. Although wherever you're watching this, you could consider this, your domestic being in your local country. But and typically offshore probably refers more towards Asia, because that's where things get a little bit more economical. Although South America, you could consider offshoring and use more economical resources. But I actually only really tested that a little bit. For the most part, with my business, I hired mostly domestic U.S., and I typically paid them between $10 to $15 per hour. In the Philippines, if you're looking for like American or English speaking, the Philippines is great. I think they speak sometimes better English than Americans, so they sound really good, very economical, pay between $2 to $5 an hour, so something to consider. I found turnover to be maybe a little bit higher with using offshore than domestic, but that's always a factor. But some things to think about there. So those are some places to find people, but selecting someone is very critical, right? So I mentioned to you that I would post a job on Craigslist, and I would get around 100 resumes. And the thing is that, okay, well, first of all, 100, and again, it's not 100 resumes, it's 100 responses, because some of them don't include resumes, which is a good example of why these aren't 100 real qualified applicants. You get a lot of not so desirable applicants in the people that you get exposed to, wherever you're, either looking for people or you have them coming to you. So it can be time consuming to filter down to the right person. So I found that to be a big challenge when I started my business. And that, so let's just say I post one job posting and I have 100 responses. It's going to take a lot of time. And at this time I was a business owner, so I was also doing sales, customer, client engagements and whatnot. So I didn't have a ton of time to go through and do all this interviewing, which if you're you know, if you're looking for a virtual sales assistant, you don't have a lot of time either. Like I said, you don't want to spend all this time getting this person interviewed, recruited, and set up. So regardless of your role, you don't have a ton of time to do interviewing as well. So what I found was I'd have 100 resumes, and I would kind of go through like 10, and I would find like a few that looked good, and then I would call a few people. I wouldn't get a hold of some people, and I'd end up on the phone with one person, and I would hire them pretty quickly because they sounded okay, and I was tired of looking at resumes and tired of trying to call people. And so I would hire someone real quickly, and if you hear the numbers that I put there, 100 responses, I'd look at it about 10, I would call about 5, and I would end up on the phone with 2 or 3, right? Those are not really good filtering numbers, meaning I did not get exposed to a lot of the people that were in there, so I didn't really do a good job of filtering out the ones that didn't fit. What that leads to is that leads to you hiring not the optimum person, and that leads to turnover, someone not doing a good job, someone quitting, and you wasting all that time. You wasted all that time interviewing, you wasted all that time hiring and training. So one thing that really transformed my business and my ability to hire good people is this process right here. I shouldn't have thrown this up because you might have been reading this when I was explaining that. But this is a process. So you have 7 steps here. So step 1, and this may seem like cumbersome or whatever, you don't really care, but this is really a key to you doing this successfully. So step 1 is to set up a voicemail box that's dedicated for you to get recordings from your applicants. Now, you're going to end up, if you're hiring a salesperson, you're going to need to set up a voicemail box for them anyways and a phone line. So you might as well just set this up for them and use it for interviewing. And when you've hired that position, then you could use that voicemail box and that phone line for them. So that's, if you're thinking, how am I going to have a voicemail box to use for interviewing? That's how you do it. Set up the line, the voicemail box, use it for interviewing. You hire the person, that's their phone line. So so you post a job posting, and then you're going to receive, let's say you receive those 100 responses. To every response you get, you send an automated email saying, "Thank you for replying," and you send them the phone number, and you say, "Call this number and answer these 2 or 3 questions." And what's going to happen here, you don't even look at the resumes that you send this to. It's just you have a template. Every response you get, you send this response, and you see what comes back. And it's interesting, only a percentage of the people that you send this to will follow your instruction. So what you're doing right there is you're filtering out the people that either aren't interested or can't follow a basic instruction. Then you're going to get only a certain number of people that actually call, because you'll get some hang-ups, whether or not you know which people hang up or not, depending on the phone system you use. The phone system I used, I knew how many hang-ups I got, but only about half of the people leave a message and half of the people hang up. So you're filtering right there as well. You're filtering out the people that might be shy or can't, be outgoing or responsive. And then you're going to get the recordings. Now, the great thing about this is that you're hiring a virtual sales assistant, so their voice, how they sound, is so critical, and you're going to hear that right away without calling anybody. So the numbers are basically, if you get 100 responses, and then you send out the template to 100 people, only 50 people are going to call your phone system, and then only 20 will leave a message, and then of the 20, then only 10 are going to sound acceptable, and then you call, and then you schedule interviews with those 10 people. So what you're getting to there basically is you're getting to the cream of the crop without reading resumes and making calls to people and chasing them. And so it will reduce your time that you spend, and it will tremendously improve your ability to get to hire a good virtual assistant. So I know that might sound like a lot of goobly gop in terms of process. It was a game changer for me in terms of my business. I ended up with people, the types of virtual assistants that were with me for years. You go from having people work for you for a day to hiring people that, like, I have a virtual assistant today that's been with me for like 3 years. And I rarely talk to her, and she just does her thing. So this is the process that gets you to those people, because they're out there. But there's a lot of garbage that you have to go through along the way. Now, step 6 is really something I kind of learned along the way, which was step 6 is ask interview questions. Well, first of all, I think a key to a salesperson being effective is asking good sales questions. The key to a person hiring top caliber people or selecting the right person out of a group of people when you're hiring is asking good interview questions. It's not rocket science, but some people just sort of, hey, tell me about yourself. Oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years? There are good interview questions to ask. And what I learned was I would hire people and they would quit or they wouldn't work out, and I would reflect on that there was a characteristic about them that they either had or didn't have that I didn't know about. And I started to realize if I would have only known that, I wouldn't have hired that person. Let's just be totally obvious. Let's just say that a person has a characteristic of that they don't like calling people, cold calling and calling people they don't know. Let's say that they have a charming personality, but you don't know that, hey, how do you feel about calling a total stranger over the phone? Does that make you nervous? Or, are you like terrified? Or is it something that you can deal with? So that's a characteristic. And there's a lot of different characteristics you might look for, like able to work independently, needs to work a certain amount of hours a week, but not too many hours a week or whatever. So basically, I started to think about what are the key characteristics that would make someone a good virtual assistant, or for me at the time, I was a virtual cold caller. And then what I did was I developed a set of questions that probed for each characteristic I was looking for. So instead of saying, hey, what's your biggest weakness, which is just a question that they're going to lie to or not answer honestly or whatever, I would, hey, tell me about a time where you displayed integrity, because maybe integrity is a good question for me. So anyways, that's just an advice on getting to the right people. Number 6, asking interview questions that align with your target characteristics. And then what I would do is I would create a spreadsheet with all the people that I interviewed, and I would put points for them in these different categories. Like they would get points for how they sounded. They would get points out 1 through 10, right? They would get points for how well of a home office environment they seemed to describe to me. That's an example of a characteristic. Are they working on a kitchen table or do they have a home office? So those were the types of things I realized that I wanted to start to look for. So I used a point system to help me determine, after I talked to 10 people, which person I would hire from a mathematical standpoint. So this is all critical for you to protect yourself from wasting time. Again, if you have to spend 10 hours a week and they quit, then you're going backwards. I told you that in Sales Scripter we've been developing some features to help with this. So this is pretty brand new. This is an area in Sales Scripter called staffing, and we're not really actively marketing it yet, but it's functional. There's an interview builder. So this is a feature that takes you through the process of building out your questions. It's basically a library of questions. So if I just show you this real quick, the system is loaded up with questions, and it's also loaded up with characteristics to look for. Because when I just showed you a couple characteristics, I said has an office environment, has integrity. Maybe those were things you hadn't thought of. You're like, yeah, those are good things to ask about. Well, this system actually is preloaded with characteristics to think about in terms of personality, skills, financial, education, and whatnot. And when you can grab your ideal list of characteristics, and then for each characteristic that you select, we give you different questions that you can choose, and you just drag and drop and build your list of questions. Now, and you can add, if there's not a question there that you think needs to be, that you want to ask, you can add your own questions. Now, you may say, well, that's nice, but that's not really going to transform what I do. The nice thing about using our question builder, or at least getting your questions in there, is that we have a form that you can use that displays your questions that you can have up when you interview somebody. And I told you that I had a spreadsheet where I would give points for someone in different categories. Well, you can score the person's answers as you're on the phone with them. And you can make notes as well. And you log those, and then you end up, we have a tool called the applicant ranker, which this basically is a very sophisticated version of the spreadsheet that I had. So let's say that these are the applicants that you're interviewing and you're pursuing. You can see there the points in the different categories for the different questions that you asked, and you can see who has the most. But so you could use this to say, okay, well, the person that has the most points is the one I'm going to hire. But you might notice that maybe someone has you might determine what is most important to you. So you can see here that this person has the highest experience, but they are very low in certain categories. So you can do some analysis here. This is designed to help you to pick the right person.